All right. Hey, everyone. It says we're live. I'm Helena Hart. And if this is your first time to my channel, how do I know that we're live, actually? It
You're
just,
live.
okay. I don't see anyone. This is the first time I'm using this software system to do live streams. So my very good friend, my best friend actually in the whole world and fellow coach Matthew Coast is here to show me how to do it. So he's going to walk me through this. And we're going to give you some really valuable information at the same time. So welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for showing me how to do this for the first time and for being here. You know, we all love your advice, myself included. And, you know, if you guys don't know Matt, if you're not familiar with him, he's an amazing coach who gives incredible advice to women looking to attract and create the relationship of their dreams. So welcome, Matt, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I appreciate you having me on your channel. It's great to be here. It's great to be a part of what you're doing. And as you know, I think you're an amazing coach as well. And I think the stuff that we teach really complements each other. And so this is a great fit. It's great to be a part of what you're doing, and that we've always kind of been on the same team here. And so I really appreciate you having me on your channel.
Today, we're going to be talking about something really important, and that is the number one method to make a man crave connecting with you, even if you're far apart for whatever reason right now. I know right now a lot of people are staying home. A lot of women in my community always ask about long distance relationships. And I personally never really have a lot to say about that because I'm not an expert in that area, but Matt is a total expert in that area. He's the creator of not only the Forever Woman, but a brand new program called Long Distance Allure. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But what we're going to be sharing is going to really be helpful, I think, no matter where you're at in dating and relationships. So Matt, let's just jump right in. What is that number one method to make a man crave connecting with you?
Sure. So the method that I want to talk about is a new method that I've created and have been using with a lot of the women who work with me, and it's something called connection cycling. And basically, it's got 4 steps to it. There's 4 steps to it. First one is connection. The second one is creating shared positive emotional experiences together. The third one is something called distancing. And then the fourth one is just repeating the cycle. And that's why it's connection cycling, because you have those 4 different things that are involved. And so there are a bunch of different mistakes that a lot of women who come to me make. And I'm just going to kind of talk about how to do this instead. And this works, like Helena said, if you're in a long distance relationship, if you're with a guy and connecting with him on a regular basis, if you're in a committed relationship, it works in all of those situations. And so one of the biggest mistakes that women tend to make with when they come to me is trying to stay connected all the time, especially in long distance relationships. They think, oh, I need to stay connected with him all the time so that he's always thinking of me, because they think in their minds that if they're out of sight, they're out of mind, right? I hear that a lot. Like, if I'm out of sight, then I'm out of mind. Well, that's only true if when you're in sight, you're really boring, right? So if he connects with you and he doesn't get a lot of kind of emotional connection when he's around you, then sure, when you're out of sight, you're going to be out of mind. But if you have a really strong emotional connection to him, then when you're out of sight, that's when he misses you. And if you're trying to connect with him all the time, he can't miss you. And so there has to be a period of time where you're not connected to each other, you're not talking to each other, you're not there with him, you're not trying to message him, right? Another mistake that women will make is, so going into kind of the emotional, did you have anything you wanted to say about that, Helena?
I think that's great. I mean, so important. You guys know I always talk about being in your feminine energy and leaning back and not constantly like pushing yourself out towards a man energetically, right? I think it's really important. You said it perfectly. And just for those of you watching, I asked Matt to kind of do most of the talking today because I have like the flu or something and it kind of hurts to talk. So I think you explained that brilliantly. I think one question a lot of people might have, well, at least I get this all the time, is how long do you wait, so to speak? I have, wait in quotes. How long do you lean back before, can you ever reach out, or should you always be leaning back? Should you always be creating that distance? Anything you have to say on that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. I just want to go over real quick a couple more mistakes that some women make. And another mistake that a lot of women make is when they're connecting with a guy, what they do is they build and create negative emotional experiences with him because they want some type of emotional response. And a lot of women think some type of emotional response is better than no emotional response at all. And so they'll end up calling him and baiting him for a certain response, trying to get him to say certain things, or they'll call him to seek reassurance that he likes her, that nothing's wrong, that he's not seeing someone else. I get women that in our community that talk about that all the time. They'll be like, oh yeah, and then I contacted him and I was like, are you mad at me? Is everything okay? Are you seeing someone else? And it's just like, you want to just chill out on that kind of thing, because you don't want to create a negative emotional connection with him and then go away, because then he's going to want to go somewhere else. When he does think of you, he's just going to think of negative things. That's why you want to create these shared positive emotional experiences together. And another mistake is leaning. So we talk about leaning back, and one of the things that happens sometimes with women in our community, because they hear leaning back, but then they don't end up getting one of Helena's programs. They just hear about leaning back. And so they go, oh, okay, I'm going to lean back. And the expression is they end up leaning so far back that they fall out of their chair. And what that is that he stops thinking that you're interested in him because you're leaning so far back, because you're not giving him any clues that you like him or that you're interested in him, or that you want him to contact you again or see you again or pursue you or chase you or do any of that kind of stuff. And unless he's really, really confident or really, really aggressive, he's not going to continue pursuing that with you. And so those are some of the big mistakes that I see a lot is women doing stuff like that, where they create negative emotional experiences, they lean too far back, and they try to stay connected all the time, which just doesn't work. And so going over to your point, so you're asking about, when can I contact him? How long should I be leaning back for?
Yeah.
What should I do? And so let's talk about the connection, right? So when you're connecting with a guy, and there's different rules out there, right? Like lots of people have different rules. For instance, there's like a 20% rule out there, which is actually a really good kind of rule of thumb, where we're talking about initiating contact. And so what you want is you want a man to be moving towards you. You want him to be pursuing you, chasing you, contacting you, initiating contact, setting up dates, taking you out, leading the experience that you're having with him. And so if you're the one that's doing it, right? If you're the one that's initiating contact all the time, if you're the one that's always calling him and setting up the dates and how about we do this, and you're, all on top of him all the time, he doesn't have a chance to do that. And it's that space and him doing that allows him to fall in love with you. It's that allows him to feel like he's invested in you, which is a very important principle, because the more invested he is in you, the more he'll feel like he doesn't want to let you go. So for instance, I used to have a Jeep, and it was a kind of a junker of a Jeep. And I ended up at one point, it kind of broke down, and I was like, should I get rid of it or should I fix it? Well, I took it to the automobile shop, and they're like, they gave me this price on fixing it that was like, it was a little bit less than what I paid for it. Well, by the time they got done fixing it, it ended up costing me over double the amount of money that it cost me to buy the vehicle. And I'm like, okay, it's like this junker Jeep, right? And I'm throwing all this money into it. But at the same time, I'm like, I can't get rid of it because I've invested so much into it. You know, I've spent so much time, so much money, like all these resources on it. Like, I don't want to let it go, you know? And I started like bonding with it, right? I came up with like a name for it and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that you should be like a junker Jeep or anything like that. But if a guy like me can feel so invested in a Jeep that he doesn't want to let it go, and it's just this, you know, this thing of metal that he's putting money into, then an amazing, beautiful, awesome woman like you, when a man invests in you, he's definitely not going to want to let you go. And he's going to feel like he's put a lot into it, and that you're somebody that's important to him because he's put a lot into it, because he looks back at his behavior and he says to himself, she must be important to me because I've invested in her. And so you want a man to invest in you as much as you possibly can. And so you have to give him that space. And so we talk about like how often, right? And it's one of those things where it's like that there is an ideal somewhere between 20, like around the 20% of the time you should be initiating contact. And notice I'm not saying zero, right? That doesn't mean you should never reach out to him. You can reach out to him. And in fact, the more he's pursuing you and the more hot he is, the more you can contact him. Yeah. So if you guys are having great conversations and he's taking you out all the time and you're having lots of fun and you're doing all these things, you can contact him and not even be concerned about it, because he's been putting he has so much momentum and so much movement forward that it's not a big deal, right? He's already super invested, and all that is doing is it's creating a stronger bond between the two of you. And so it's not a big deal if he's moving forward. But if you're doing all the initiating, right? Like if you go over that 50% mark and you start initiating contact more and more and more and more, you're not even going to know whether he's invested or not, or whether he's even interested or not. Because unlike women, men will continue to see a woman if he's not really interested in her long term. Most women that I talk to, they're like, oh, well, if I'm not really interested in him, I'm just going to get out of the situation altogether. Sometimes women and actually it's happening a lot more, especially in the hookup culture these days, where women are getting into situations and they're just hooking up with guys and they're staying in these situations where there's no long-term potential there. But for the most part, if something turns a woman off, it turns her off completely. Whereas with a guy, if something turns him off, he's like, well, I'll still hook up with her, right? And still let her do all these things. And since you're doing all the forward momentum and calling him all the time and setting up the dates and figuring out when things should be, because if you don't do it, he doesn't do it either. All of a sudden he's leaning back. He's the one leaning back. You're the one leaning forward. And he's just going along with it until one day something ends up happening where, you know, maybe he was never really that interested in the first place. And so all of a sudden he disappears and you're like, oh my God, because you just put all this investment into him, right? You spent all this time, money, energy, effort into creating this relationship with him. So you feel like you don't want to lose him, where he didn't invest at all. So he doesn't care. And so he's just doing whatever, right? And so he's like, I can leave and it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. You know, I haven't invested anything. It's not like I like her that much. She likes me a lot. And so you want to, at the very least, lean back so that he can have that momentum and start doing things and start creating that investment. And you get to find out whether there's desire there. You get to find out if there's interest there, which you won't get if you're the one that's doing everything.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I love everything you said there. We have, I posted a video with the two of us on my channel called, I think it was something about the surprising thing that blinds you to a man's true intentions. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. I love what you said too about, if a man's really pursuing something, I always say is that, you can do anything you want. If you know a man's crazy about you, if his energy is coming towards you, if you know for sure that he would love to commit to you, anytime you're ready, you can do anything. You can call him up, you can invite him over, cook him dinner, you can give to him as much as you want, because it's not, he's not going anywhere. But most women who come to us, Matt, I'd love to hear your experiences with this, but a lot of women that come, at least to my channel, they're not at that place where they know a man's crazy about you. So I would say our job is to kind of help you get to that place where then you can just relax and do whatever you want, right?
Exactly.
But until then, just like Matt said, it's important to lean back and at least experience a man's energy coming towards you or not, see what he does.
Right.
And sorry, my my voice is definitely going now. I love what you said too about, men are kind of happy to take what you have to give, they'll take everything you got, but that doesn't necessarily mean, just because he's taking what you're giving him, doesn't mean that he's moving one step closer to that committed relationship you want. As women, we can do that. We kind of see every little thing that happens as like a step along this, I call it the relationship roadmap, right? We think everything's moving us closer, where for a man, it's not necessarily like that, right?
Yep. It absolutely isn't like that. It's for men, it's more like 0 to 100, right? He figures out that he's interested and he starts pursuing. There's a little bit of a period of time where he's trying to make sure, and he kind of needs to figure out whether you're the right one for him or not. But once he does, it's usually pretty quick. It's not, and it doesn't, none of the other things matter, right? Like we have women that have been in our community for over a decade who have been seeing some guy, and they've met, she's met his parents, he's met her parents, they go and hang out together, sometimes they live together, all kinds of different things. And he still doesn't see her as anything more than just a casual fling. And the reason is because they haven't had that, or when they did have the conversation, usually they have had the conversation by that point. And usually what the guy says is, I don't want anything serious. Like, let's not do anything serious. How about we just, hang out and have fun, right? And they go out and hang out with their friends, with his friends. And he's like, oh yeah, she's just a friend of mine. She's just a friend of mine, and she's like, no, we're more, she thinks he's joking or something, and she's like, yeah, he just messes around with that, but deep inside, she's like crying and dying. And he, and for him, he legitimately is just like, this is just a fling. This is just a short-term thing that isn't going anywhere. And I'm totally okay with that. And so you have to make sure that 1, you're protecting yourself. 2, you're getting yourself into a really good situation. And 3, that you're coming from a place of value where you value yourself and you're not getting yourself into a situation that isn't a good situation for you because you want to convince yourself that something is more than what it actually is.
Absolutely. What's the next thing you wanted to mention? Or do you want to get to some of these questions?
So let's talk about the connection real quick, because I think this is really, really important, because some of these women they're talking about, like, for instance, the whole, it's like, okay, well, how long with space, right? How long before I contact him? And it shouldn't be like that, right? I mean, first off, it's one of those things, especially in the beginning, like a lot of times things aren't as fast as maybe you want them to be. And it's okay. It's okay for it not to be super fast. And you can kind of let it take some time, right? Like if 5 days has gone by, it's also one of those things where it's like, 1, that's normal. And 2, if a long period of time has gone by and you guys are first kind of dating and you're just starting to see each other or whatever, it's okay for you to send him a message or something like that, because what's going on at that point is, like, if you didn't build a really strong connection from the beginning, which might be the situation that you're in, because you're like, what should I do at this point? I'm leaning back and the guy's not contacting me. it might be that you need to reinitiate things and let him know that you are interested and get him excited about hanging out with you again, because when you were with him the time before, you didn't do the things that you needed to do to create that strong connection with him. And so let's talk about creating that strong connection so that you aren't in a situation where you're feeling like, oh my God, I had this great connection with this guy and he's not contacting me. And so there's this concept out there, and it's in psychology. It's called neurological emotional anchoring. And I call it anchoring for short, right? And basically all it is a psychological term that talks about like your connection to somebody, right? Like your emotional connection to somebody. And so for instance, I was blessed to have a mother who makes amazing apple pies. I mean, she just makes the best apple pies in the world. And when I was a kid, all the apple pies that I would get would be from my mom. And they just, so delicious. The crust, the apples, the way that she cooked it was it's just unbelievable. I've never had anything like it before in my life. Well, whenever I smell an apple pie at any point in time ever in the rest of my life, I always think of my mom, right? So if I go somewhere and I eat an apple pie, I immediately compare it to my mom's apple pie. And I'm always like, you know what? My mom makes the best apple pies. You know, I mean, this is okay too, right? But my mom makes the best apple pies. And what that does, right, is there's this emotional connection that I have, this association that I have to my mom and apple pies, right? And you can do that. Like it's something I actually call in my Love Frames toolkit. I call it the obsession frame. And you can create associations to anything. So for instance, let's say that you introduce a song to your guy and you create an emotion, like you have a fun time. You have them listen to the song, and let's say it's a popular song, and you guys are both listening to it in the car, and it's a lot of fun, and you're just like, and you're hugging and kissing and high-fiving or whatever you do with your guy, smacking each other's butts, whatever you're doing with your guy. No judgment here. And right. And you're listening to this song, and the song comes on again, and you guys do the same thing again. And every time the song comes on, you do it again. Right. Next thing you know, when that guy hears that song, when you're not around, what's he going to think of? He's going to think of you. He's going to think of you, and he's going to think of how much fun you guys had together. Well, there's another association that he's making as well, not just to a third object, but also to you. So whenever he's around you, he has a certain emotional experience. And so when he thinks of you, he has a certain emotional experience, which is why it's so important to to have him thinking and feeling positive emotional experiences when he's around you, and not caught into these negative ones, because you want him to see your face and feel good, see your face and feel good, see your face and feel good. Because then when he sees your face, when he looks at a picture of yours, when he thinks of you in his mind, he'll think good thoughts about you, and he'll feel good about you, and he'll miss you, and he'll be like, oh man, I wish my girlfriend was here right now. I wish I was just holding her and hugging her and kissing her and loving her. It would just be so amazing, right? That's the experience that you want him to have, because then when he goes long distance and you're in a situation where you guys can't see each other or hang out with each other, and he's thinking about you, he's just thinking good thoughts, and he's feeling good things, and he's missing you, and he wants to see you again. And so that's what anchoring is. And so you want to create as many positive emotional anchors to him as you possibly can, or for him to have those to you. But there's more than just one emotion, right? There's multiple emotions. And so, I know what a lot of women are going to say right now. I don't want to always be happy and smiling all the time. I have bad days, and that's totally fine. There's no problem if you have like a bad day here and you need somebody's shoulder to cry on, and you guys have, right? Because it's a range of emotions that ultimately happen. And that is what creates depth in a human being. Yeah. But for the most part, you want him to feel positive emotional experiences with you. Think about it in terms of like a movie, right? You go and see a movie, and the best movies that you've ever seen in your life are always movies that make you, overall, you have a really good positive emotional experience watching it, but they also take you through a whole bunch of emotional states, right? If you go and see a movie and it's just like, there's this guy and some really great things happen, and then some other good things happen, and then some more good things happen. You get out of the movie and you're like, that movie was okay. I mean, it was nice. It was fun, whatever. But who cares, right? The best movies make you laugh. They make you cry. They make you scared. They make you curious. They make you all those things, but wrapped over around it, you feel a positive emotional experience from watching the movie.
I love it. Yeah. Okay, I was going to say that's such a great analogy, right? Because I talk so much about feminine energy and how like we can be feeling all kinds of things all at the same time, right? And I think as women we have a lot more flexibility emotionally, or kind of more agency to tap into some of these things. So a lot of times men can experience that side of themselves through us, through being in connection with us. My question was going to be, how does a woman do that? I'm sure you'll get to that too. But yeah, this is gold. This is all such great info. So yeah. Yeah.
So there's really two main ways to do it. And the first way is your connection to yourself. And so there's kind of two components to this as well. And the first component is, how much do you really value yourself? How much do you love yourself? How much do you believe that you deserve a great man in a great relationship? Because whether you realize it or not, what's going to happen when you're around a man or around anybody is that your beliefs kind of trickle out of you. And the way that you act, and no matter how much you train yourself, your beliefs end up coming through. So if you believe that you don't deserve to have a good man in your life, it doesn't matter how much you practice different lines that I give you or somebody gives you. It doesn't matter how many text messages you've got in your database. What's going to end up happening over time is you're going to start behaving and acting like you're somebody who doesn't believe that you deserve to have a good man in your life. And there's something that I call the law of belief transference. And that is, whoever has the strongest belief about something transfers that belief to the other person. So for instance, if a guy meets you and he thinks, man, this woman is beautiful. She is absolutely gorgeous. I've never met such an amazing woman in my life. But you're sitting there thinking like, I don't deserve this man. I don't deserve love. I'm not worthy of having a great relationship. What's going to end up happening over time is that your belief is going to break his belief. And eventually he's going to start picking up on the fact that you don't believe that you deserve it. And he is going to start believing that you don't deserve him as well. And so it's very, very important that you change the way that you think and the way that you feel about yourself so that you believe that you deserve to have a great relationship. And the second thing is connecting to yourself in the moment, right? Connecting to your emotions, connecting to your body, connecting to how you feel and what's going on with you, and kind of the experience of life and the universe, and just being connected to your feminine energy. And those two together is your connection to yourself. And that is one of the first components of connecting to him. Did you want to say anything about that?
I think that's amazing. Thank you for giving those very kind of concrete examples. I think it's totally true. I mean, we could, we could pretend to be confident. We could have all of the, tools and things to say in the world, but if deep down you're feeling insecure, there's a disconnect there. Not only is the insecurity going to come out, but a man can feel the disconnect. He can feel that what you're conveying on the outside with your words and body language is different than what you're feeling on the inside. Men are much more sensitive to this than we think they are. Sometimes we tend to think men are clueless, but they actually pick up on these things. So they can tell if you don't love yourself. we were thinking about doing a live stream on, what to do during this time when a lot of people are home and, have time to watch some of these things and do some of this work on themselves. And let us know if this would be interesting for you guys. We thought about working on your beliefs and self-love and uncovering some of these insecurities and healing them so you can authentically be confident and just go out in the world acting according to that belief that you deserve a great man and an amazing relationship, right? So that's really important. It's not a quick fix. That side of it is not a quick fix. It's kind of like deeper healing work. I imagine, Matt, do you agree?
Well, it depends. It depends on what methodology you seek to do this work. And there's a conditioning component to it, right? So a lot of people go out there and they'll go to a seminar or something and they'll get all pumped up, right? And then they'll like leave it and they're like, yeah, but over time they start losing it. Next thing you know, they're back, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like a garden, right? If you don't tend to your garden and clean up your garden, if you have a garden, if you've ever had a garden before, what you'll find is that weeds will start growing. And if you don't tend to your garden and clean up those weeds at some point, they grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until they're overshadowing all the flowers and all the stuff that you want to grow there. And so you have to go and clean out the weeds and then spend time growing the flowers, growing the plants that you want to have growing in your garden. And you need to do it consciously. And it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time. If you have some huge weeds in your garden, it might take some strength and some really ripping them out a little bit, which could be a long process depending on which process you go through. It could be a short process depending on how resistant you are to it. If you're really resistant to it, it might take a little bit longer. But if you're not very resistant to it, it could take as little as a day or a couple hours or even shorter than that, depending on what it is. And so it really depends. It really depends on what's going on with you and what process you're using to do it. But it's absolutely important that you condition yourself to believe and feel the things that you want to believe and that you want to feel on a regular basis, so that when you go into the world and you go and meet a guy, it's not, I'm stuck in all these negative mindsets and, I don't feel like I'm worthy and I'm constantly baiting them for compliments and all those kinds of things. You come into it feeling strong and powerful and full of love, and like you are love, like you radiate love from you. And if you can get to a place like that, your connection with men will radically change.
Yeah.
And I've seen women go from being in a space where they felt like what usually the things that you hear, right? Like, men don't want commitment. Men just want to hook up. Men don't want anything to do with me. I never get a second date because I don't sleep with guys, right? All that stuff disappears. And all of a sudden what you start hearing from them is, I got all these guys that want to date me. Like every time I go on a date, it's like, they fall in love with me and want to get married to me. It's like weird. And so it's a totally different experience that happens when you connect to yourself in that way. And you come from a place where you're not needy and desperate and clingy and trying to get from him constantly. Instead, you're giving love, you're giving connection. And he experiences that. And, and when he leaves, he's like, that was amazing. I've never experienced anything like that before. I've never met a woman like that before, because they're so rare in this world. And so if you can come from that space, it's really, really easy. And there's also techniques that you can do, which is what I was going to share next. Some techniques. Do you want to hear the techniques, or should we do question and answer?
I would love to. No, I was going to say, you're the best person in the world to have on my channel when I have the flu, because everything out of your mouth is gold and you just talk, everything's great. I'm just like hanging on your every word here. Yeah, go join our community, by the way.
Techniques.
The Goddess community, search for it on Facebook, go join. You'll see the transformation, or you'll see exactly what Matt's talking about. Women going from, feeling like they can't hang on to the man they want, to having this abundance of men and feeling like Like they have the power to choose. So everything you said about beliefs and how you feel about yourself and the world and what's available to you, that has everything to do with your connection with the man. It's completely on point here. So yeah, everyone's asking for videos about that. We'd love to do some more videos about some of this inner work at some point too. But yes, for right now, let's get to those techniques, and then we'll get to your questions at the end too, you guys.
Okay. All right. So the techniques. So what we were talking about was connection. And so the two different types of connection, one is connecting to yourself, and the next one is connecting to him specifically and using some kind of technique to connect with him specifically. And so we talked about the emotional range principle where you want him to experience a range of different emotions. And so the fastest and absolute easiest and most powerful way to get a man to experience different types of emotions when you're around him is to ask him questions. That is just absolutely the fastest, right? Because what we focus on is what we experience. And so the way that our mind determines what we focus on is usually it's either one, reactive, or two, it's based on the questions that we ask it. And so most people ask our minds really bad questions like, why am I not good enough? Why can't any man love me? Why, all those kinds of things. So if you change your questions, that's actually one of the ways to do some healing, is to change the way that you question your own mind. But we're talking about the guy here though. So I'm switching over, going to the techniques with the guy. And so the technique with the guy is to ask him different questions about different things and just expect him to potentially ask you questions back that might be the same. So let's say that you want to ask him about something that he's excited about, right? You want to get him excited. Just ask him, like, is there anything you're excited about in your life right now? Right? And he will start thinking about things that he's excited about. And if he thinks about it long enough, he'll start feeling things that he's excited about. And if he starts feeling things that he's excited about, he'll start looking at you and he'll start anchoring the feeling of excitement to you. And then if he does that enough, then every time he sees you, he'll get excited. Doesn't that sound like a good emotion for him to have?
Amazing. Love it. Yeah. Like asking what he's passionate about, things like that. So I think that's amazing. Love it. Yeah. Christina asked, would that be leaning forward, asking questions?
I would say no. And because you have to have conversation, right? Like, so sometimes women come to me and they're like, okay, is this one thing leaning forward? Is this one thing leaning back? And it's like, well, you have to think of it more like a tennis match. Right. Yeah. If he hits the ball over to you, you hit the ball over to him. Right. And what's not tennis is you hitting balls over to him and him not hitting them back. What is tennis is him hitting a ball, you hitting a ball, him hitting a ball, you hitting a ball. And so it's not really leaning forward, right? It's connecting. It's being curious. It's asking him to lean forward and start investing from a conversational standpoint, right? And so is the physical act of asking him a question leaning forward? It doesn't matter, because what you're asking for is you're creating an invitation for him to walk somewhere, right? For him to invest, for him to put energy into the conversation that you're having. And so if you ask him a question and he starts talking about it, is he leaning forward? Are you leaning forward? Really what's happening is he's investing. He's investing in the conversation, and you're asking him to invest in the conversation, which means that you're interested in him on a subconscious level. And so he thinks, oh, she's curious about me. And it's one of those things we actually talked about. I don't know. I was talking about this on my one of the live streams recently. And it was this thing about whether you're, how to be interesting to somebody, how to have interesting conversations with somebody. One way to do it is to have lots of interesting things to say. The other way to do it is to be curious about somebody and just ask them questions and let them talk and let them have a conversation with you and lead the and you lead the conversation, but you're giving him ways to take the ball and run with it, which is what you want him to do. Because once he starts running with it, he's investing in you, and he's feeling like he's what ends up happening. And if you've ever been in a conversation with somebody who asks you lots of questions before and doesn't even necessarily say a whole lot of things about themselves, but they just ask you lots of questions, a lot of times what you'll get done and you'll be like, man, I really like that person. Right? Because they're curious about you, and your favorite subject is you, just like a man's favorite subject is him. And so if he's talking about himself all the time and you find some topics that are really interesting to him and he gets passionate about it, he starts talking about it, he's going to associate those emotions to you, and he's going to think that he really likes you because you're so interested in his favorite topic, which is him.
If you're coming from a place of anxiety, like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like we're connecting, or I think he's slipping through my fingers, so I'm going to lean forward and ask him a bunch of questions or reach out because I'm anxious and I haven't heard from him, then obviously you're at a place where you're trying to make something happen, right? But if you're having a conversation and he's asking you questions and you're an invitation for him to kind of step forward more into the conversation, I'd say you're coming from a feminine energy place. And yeah, I think it's great. Love everything you said. I think it's totally right on.
Cool.